The explosion came from above, not from the street, not from the alleys, from the sky that was supposed to be theirs. Sergeant Elena Vance watched the second vehicle in the convoy erupt into a column of fire from her rooftop position 900 meters north. The shockwave pushed a wall of dust through the boulevard below. Civilians scattered. A child's shoe spun through the air and landed on a burning hood. Elena's scope swept upward. The drone signature was American. The targeting code was American. But the convoy was American. She pressed her cheek harder against the rifle stock and scanned the skyline to the east. There, a rooftop, 600 meters, a figure, watching her. He didn't fire, he just watched and waited. The city didn't welcome them, it absorbed them. That was the difference Elena had learned in 3 deployments. Some cities push back with noise and aggression, with burning tires and crowds that surge like water finding cracks. But this city, this sprawling gray and concrete megacity wedged between the Alborz foothills and the industrial flatlands to the south, this city simply swallowed you. It took the convoy's rumble and buried it under the ambient pressure of 10 million lives. It took the military frequencies and bent them around glass towers until they fragmented into static. It took the afternoon light and fractured it across 1,000 rooftop water tanks until shadows moved where nothing was moving. Elena had read the intelligence briefing 3 times on the flight in. Dense urban environment, hostile district, Iran-backed militia presence estimated at battalion strength, population civilian heavy, rules of engagement restrictive. The briefing had not mentioned that the city itself would feel like a third enemy. She was climbing now, 14 floors of a construction shell on the northern edge of the objective boulevard, her pack heavy with the Barrett M107 broken down across her back, her legs burning on concrete stairs that had never seen a finishing coat of plaster. The building smelled of dust and rebar and something older, cooking oil and cardamom from the apartments below, a smell that had seeped into the concrete over decades and would never fully leave. At the top, she crouched behind a half wall of exposed block and assembled the rifle by feel, eyes already working the terrain. The boulevard stretched south for approximately 1,200 meters before bending east around a cluster of towers that had been half-finished when some previous war or economic collapse had stopped the cranes. Between her position and that bend, 6 lanes of cracked asphalt, a median strip of dead palm trees, 3 intersecting side streets that intelligence had flagged as militia movement corridors, and somewhere in that geometry, the convoy's planned route. "You up?" Marcus Hale's voice came through her earpiece, flat and calm the way it always was. The way Elena had come to understand meant he was paying attention to everything at once. "Set," she said. "Northwest corner, floor 14. Good elevation, clean sight lines south and east. Southeast quadrant?" She swiveled. The glass-faced commercial tower 2 blocks east caught the afternoon sun and threw a slab of reflected light directly across her field of view. She blinked and adjusted her angle. "Compromised. Glass tower at bearing 110 is going to be a problem when the sun drops another 15 degrees. "Copy that." A pause. "City's live, Vance. Every window is a rifle. Every rooftop is a hide. Don't let the geometry convince you it's manageable. It's never manageable." "No, but some snipers forget that." She heard him exhale. Not quite a laugh, not quite contempt. Something between the two. They start reading sightlines like a diagram. Clean angles, clean math. City doesn't care about your math. She heard boots on the stairs below. Her hand moved to the pistol at her hip and stayed there until the stairwell clanged with the sound of Specialist Torres from the convoy security element confirming his call sign. "Overwatch is set," Elena reported into the command net. "Call sign Ghost 1. I have eyes on the objective route. 3 blocks south, the convoy was forming up. Chief Warrant Officer Marcus Hale ran the mission brief from the back of the command vehicle with the precision of a man who had delivered similar briefs in similar vehicles in similar cities for 30 years and had learned that brevity was not laziness, it was mercy. The package, he said, tapping the laminated photograph on the fold-down table, is Prometheus, an AI-driven targeting integration system, experimental, classified at compartmented level above most of your clearances. He looked around the vehicle, 6 faces. Elena had joined via earpiece from her overwatch position. What you need to know is this. Prometheus is designed to allow drone systems to distinguish between civilian vehicles, military vehicles, and militia assets in real time. Theoretically, it reduces collateral damage in high-density urban environments. Theoretically, said Lieutenant Reyes, convoy commander, 26 years old, West Point ring on his right hand. Theoretically, Marcus agreed without apology. The system has been tested in controlled environments. This is its first operational transport through a live combat zone. Our mission is to move it from the northern staging area to the Israeli technical team at the Southern Coordination Hub. 11 kilometers, estimated transit time 40 minutes. And the Israelis need it because, Reyes began, because their drone network in this sector is flying semi-blind and they've taken 3 friendly fire incidents in the last 2 weeks. Prometheus integration is supposed to fix that. Marcus folded the briefing sheet. Questions. It wasn't really a question, it was a gate. Elena spoke from the earpiece. The system, is it networked during transport? Live connection to the drone grid? Marcus's eyes moved to the vehicle ceiling for a fraction of a second. The tell Elena had learned to read. The tell that meant he was choosing how much to say. It maintains a passive monitoring connection, he said, to verify system integrity during transport. So it's live. Passively. That's not the same as off. The silence in the vehicle lasted approximately 2 seconds. Reyes looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at the briefing sheet he had already folded. No, Marcus said. It's not the same as off. Elena said nothing more. But in her overwatch position 14 floors above the city, she adjusted the focus ring on her scope by a single millimeter and began methodically scanning rooftops she had already scanned, looking again for the things she might have missed the first time. She had learned to distrust systems that were live when they should have been quiet. She had learned it the hard way, in a valley in Iraq whose name she no longer spoke aloud, where a networked targeting algorithm had painted friendly positions as hostile for 11 minutes before anyone caught the error. 11 minutes. 6 men. She scanned the rooftops and said nothing. The convoy was scheduled to move at 15:30 hours. At 14:47, Elena noticed the first anomaly. It was the drone. Not the Prometheus package itself, the ISR drone running overwatch coverage above the boulevard, a Puma-class system flying a lazy figure-8 at approximately 400 feet. Standard coverage pattern. She had watched it complete 6 loops since she'd set up her position and had filed it as background, the way you filed the sound of traffic or wind. On the 7th loop, the drone's path tightened. Not dramatically, not enough to trigger any alert on any screen in the command vehicle below. But Elena was watching it through 8-power magnification because she watched everything through 8-power magnification, and she saw it. The loop's eastern extent shortened by approximately 40 meters. The drone was drifting fractionally west, correcting, drifting again. The pattern wasn't mechanical malfunction. Mechanical malfunction produced random drift. This was oscillation, a system fighting itself, 2 conflicting inputs producing a visible wobble in the flight path. She marked it mentally and said nothing. Not yet. It could be interference. It could be a firmware glitch. It could be the signal environment in this sector doing what signal environments in megacities always did, which was whatever they wanted. But she marked it. At 15:03, the civilian traffic on the boulevard changed. Not vanished. In militia-controlled sectors, traffic vanishing was a warning sign so well known it had become doctrine. This was subtler. The traffic continued to flow, but the vehicles in the southern lanes slowed marginally. Not stopping, not turning around, just fractionally reducing speed, the way a crowd slows when people near the front have seen something the people in the back haven't been told about yet. Elena scanned the southern end of the boulevard and found nothing that explained the slowdown. At 15:11, her radio produced 3 seconds of white noise on the command frequency, resolved itself, then produced 2 more seconds, then normal. She keyed Marcus's private channel. "You getting interference on command net?" "Intermittent. S6 says it's the building density." S6 says a lot of things. He does. The tone in Marcus's voice was the tone of a man who had heard S6 explanations in a lot of cities. "What are you seeing?" "ISR drone had a wobble at 1447. Traffic in south lanes is bleeding speed. Radio interference at 1511. She paused. "Any one of those is nothing. All 3 together is a pattern." The line was quiet for 4 seconds. "I'll push the departure back 10 minutes, Marcus said. "Request updated ISR feed review from the Joint Ops Center." "Request denied, most likely." "Most likely," he agreed, "but I'll ask." The request was, in fact, denied. The Joint Operations Center cited schedule integrity and the Israeli technical team's receiving window. The convoy would depart at 15:30 as planned. Elena watched the ISR drone complete its loop. The wobble was still there. Faint, persistent. She chambered around and waited. At 15:28, the convoy began to move. 4 vehicles. Lead vehicle, a hardened MRAP, call sign Hammer 1. Second vehicle, a logistics truck carrying the Prometheus hardware in a shock-mounted transit case, call sign Package. Third vehicle, another MRAP, Hammer 2. Trail vehicle, a light reconnaissance platform carrying Marcus and the command element, call sign Command. Elena tracked them from above, her scope moving in slow sweeps between the convoy's position and the rooftops ahead of its route. The boulevard was wide enough for the vehicles to maintain spacing. Militia doctrine in this sector favored channeling attacks. RPG fire from a side street to stop the lead vehicle, then concentrated small arms from elevated positions to suppress the security element while the package vehicle was targeted. She knew the buildings. She had spent the previous 90 minutes logging every window, every rooftop parapet, every balcony with a sightline to the route. 47 elevated positions worth noting. She had categorized them by threat probability, memorized the order, and was now cycling through them in sequence every 45 seconds. What she had not logged, because there was no way to log it, because it presented itself as ordinary, was the sense of another watcher. It was not visual. She had no confirmed sighting. It was the accumulation of small things. A rooftop pigeon taking flight from a position she had assessed as clear, then returning, then taking flight again. A water tank on a building at bearing 065 that appeared, in the heat shimmer, to have a faintly different profile than it had 20 minutes ago. Not different enough to be certain. Different enough to note. She was noting it when Hammer 1 reached the first intersection and the side street to the east erupted. The RPG came from the third-floor balcony of a residential building 40 meters down the side street. Elena had assessed that balcony as low probability. The firing angle to the main boulevard was acute. The approach corridor for a militia element was exposed. She had been wrong. The RPG skipped off the MRAP's rear deflection plate and detonated against the median barrier. No kill. The vehicle rocked but kept moving. Then the secondary came from the west side, which was what the east side strike had been designed to force them toward. 2 shooters, roof level, western building, AK pattern rifles. They opened up on Hammer 1 and Package simultaneously, working the windows, looking for a gap. Elena had the first shooter in her scope before he'd completed his second burst. She exhaled to the natural pause and squeezed. The .50 caliber round crossed 620 meters in just over half a second. The shooter on the western roof went down and did not come back up. She was already cycling, acquiring the second shooter, when she noticed his position. He was using the rooftop water tank as cover. The water tank whose profile had looked slightly different 20 minutes ago. She shot him through the tank. The water that poured out was pink. "Ghost 1, 2 tangos down, western rooftop," she reported. "Command, maintain speed. Do not stop for the median damage." "Copy, Ghost 1. Reyes's voice, tight but controlled. The convoy accelerated through the intersection. Elena was already scanning east, toward the position where the pigeon had taken flight twice, toward the water tank whose profile had changed. Nothing. Whoever had been there, if anyone had been there, was already gone. The main ambush came 400 meters south of the first contact point. It was well planned. Elena could appreciate that even while working against it. The militia element had used the RPG strike and the subsequent radio traffic to confirm the convoy's speed and spacing, feed that data to the ambush position, and calibrate the timing. Professional work. 3 RPG teams in elevated positions, 2 on the east side, 1 on the west, staggered to prevent Elena from servicing all 3 with a single repositioning. Small arms from a ground-level element using vehicle wrecks as cover in a side street to the south. And something Elena hadn't seen in her pre-mission survey, a heavy machine gun position set up in the gutted shell of what appeared to have been a commercial storefront, firing through the open front face of the building directly at Hammer 2. The machine gun opened first. That was the signal. Elena was on the Eastern RPG team because they represented the highest probability kill threat to the package vehicle. She took the first shooter at the moment of the machine gun's opening burst, then tracked immediately to the second position while her bolt was still cycling. The second RPG team had anticipated counter-sniper response and was already moving. A trained reaction, pull the launcher down, move 2 meters laterally, re-shoulder. The move took them 2 seconds. Elena used 1.5 of those seconds to reacquire. She fired. Below on the boulevard, Hammer 1 had stopped. Not tactically, not by choice. The machine gun had shredded a front tire, and the driver was fighting to control the vehicle. Reyes was calling for suppression on the gun position. Marcus's voice cut in over Reyes. "Do not stop. Drive through. Do not stop." The driver of Hammer 1 drove through. The MRAP ground forward on 3 tires and 1 rim, sparks scattering across the asphalt, and the machine gun rounds walked up its flank and found the armored glass of the passenger window and started white without penetrating. Elena had the Western RPG team in her scope. The shooter was leaning out from behind a rooftop parapet, establishing his firing angle on the now slowed package vehicle. She shot him at the moment he achieved his angle, which was also the moment before he would have fired. The RPG went downward instead of forward, detonating against the side of the building 2 floors below him. The explosion blew a section of wall into the street and raised a column of dust that temporarily obscured her view of the package vehicle. "Ghost 1, sit rep," Marcus said. 3 RPG teams neutralized. Machine gun still active on your southern approach. I need to reposition to service it. Negative, hold overwatch. We have ground elements suppressing the gun position. Elena held. She swept her scope in a slow arc, covering the approaches, marking new threats, cataloging what remained. And that was when she felt it again. The sense she had felt before the ambush began, before the water tank had changed profile. Another watcher. Not below. Not on the obvious rooftops she had already cleared. Higher. She elevated her scope toward the upper floors of the glass-faced commercial tower to the east. The tower she had flagged at setup as a reflected light problem. The afternoon sun had dropped the predicted 15 degrees. The reflection had shifted. And in the gap between the reflected glare and the upper floor darkness, at what she estimated was floor 18 or 19, she saw a shape. Still, disciplined, high enough to have a sight line across the entire operational area. The shape did not move. It was watching the ambush the same way she was, as an observer studying a problem, not as a participant. Then it was gone. Not moving, just gone, the way a skilled sniper goes gone. A shift of depth, a change of angle, a withdrawal into background. Elena kept her scope on the position for 11 seconds after the shape disappeared. "Contact," she said, finally, quietly so only Marcus heard it. "Location? East. Glass tower. 18th floor or above. Visual for approximately 4 seconds. No shot taken, no weapon visible." A pause. "Could be civilian." No civilian watches an ambush from an elevated position without moving, panicking, or filming. Another pause. Longer. "Could be media." Media doesn't vanish like that. She heard Marcus breathing. Once. Twice. "Keep it logged," he said. "Don't engage without confirmation." I know. She did know. But she also knew that professional observation from an elevated position in a militia-controlled sector during an active ambush was not a passive act. It was intelligence gathering. It was assessment. It was the first phase of what came next, whatever came next. The convoy regrouped at the 700-meter mark in the partial shelter of a pedestrian overpass spanning the boulevard. Hammer 1 was mobile, but degraded. One destroyed tire replaced by the vehicle's run-flat system, which Marcus had told her would last approximately 3 kilometers at reduced speed before the rim began to damage the drive system. The machine gun position had been suppressed by the ground security element. 2 militia fighters confirmed down. No friendly casualties. Minor injuries to a crew member in Hammer 2 from flying glass during the RPG's concussive pressure wave. By any immediate measure, the convoy had performed well. Elena was aware that immediate measures were not the measure that mattered. She had relocated during the ambush's final phase, moving laterally across the construction shell's 14th floor to a northeast-facing window. The glass tower was visible from here at a slightly different angle, the reflected glare reduced enough that she could work the upper floors. She found no further movement. Whatever had been watching was either deeper inside the building or gone entirely. She was running this through her mind: possible positions, possible purposes, possible affiliations, when the drone struck. It came without warning signature, no incoming alert, no targeting notification on the command net. The Puma-class ISR drone that had been running Overwatch coverage above the boulevard simply changed its flight path, descended from 400 feet to approximately 200, and fired a single Hellfire derivative at the package vehicle. The explosion was precise. The transit case containing the Prometheus hardware was in the rear third of the logistics truck's cargo bed. The strike hit the cargo bed, not the cab, not the front axle, not a proximity strike, the cargo bed. The system it was transporting, the truck buckled. The rear half became a column of fire. The cab survived intact, the 2 occupants throwing doors open and rolling onto the asphalt with the trained urgency of people who had heard that sound before. Elena's scope was on the drone at the moment of impact. She tracked it through its post-strike climb, reading the flight telemetry in the way she had learned to read it over 3 deployments. And what she read was wrong. The drone's post-strike behavior was not erratic. It was not a malfunctions departure, not a hijack systems confusion. It climbed cleanly, banked south, and resumed a patrol pattern. It behaved like a system that had done exactly what it was programmed to do. She keyed Marcus's private channel. "The drone just struck package." "I know, I'm looking at it." "Marcus, the strike pattern, it was precise. Cargo bed only. The cab is intact." Silence. "The cab is intact," she repeated, because whatever designated the target knew the Prometheus hardware was in the cargo bed and not the cab. That's not a targeting error, that's a targeting success. The line was quiet for 4 seconds. "Tell me what you're thinking," Marcus said. "I'm thinking the drone didn't malfunction," Elena said. "I'm thinking someone told it to shoot." The convoy was static under the overpass. Reyes was calling for medevac on the command net, though there were no serious casualties. Protocol, not necessity. Marcus was coordinating with the Joint Operations Center, his voice controlled in the way it became when he was managing his own anger. Elena was not managing anything. She was working. Her secondary kit included a signals intelligence package, a compact SDR receiver, and a ruggedized tablet that could, in a permissive electronic environment, pull and decode drone telemetry. This was not a permissive electronic environment. The jamming that had been causing radio interference since before the convoy moved was still active, attenuating signals across most useful frequencies. But the Prometheus system, or what remained of it, was still broadcasting. Weakly, damaged, its transit case cracked open and half-burned, but still maintaining the passive monitoring connection that Marcus had described in the briefing. Still connected to the drone grid that had just struck it. Elena was not supposed to be able to access that connection. Her clearance was not supposed to cover it. She accessed it anyway. She had learned the protocols in that valley in Iraq, whose name she no longer spoke, when understanding the system that had killed 6 men had required understanding the access she technically wasn't authorized to use. She had been given a formal reprimand. She had also been given the informal acknowledgement of everyone who had read the after-action report. The feed came through in fragments, degraded, partially corrupted by the strike damage, but legible enough. The targeting data showed what she had suspected and feared more than she had let herself believe. The package vehicle had been flagged in the Prometheus system's active monitoring log at 1,534 hours. 4 minutes after the convoy began moving. Flagged not as friendly, flagged as a high-value hostile asset. The classification source in the log was a remote access event, an external input, not a system error. Someone had reached into the Prometheus system's live monitoring connection, the passive connection, the one that was supposed to only be receiving, not transmitting, and reclassified the package vehicle from friendly to hostile in the targeting architecture. The reclassification had propagated to the drone grid. The drone grid had done what it was designed to do with hostile, high-value assets. Elena stared at the fragmented data on her tablet for a long moment. The signal identifier for the remote access event was partially corrupted. She could not pull a full attribution, but she could pull the routing architecture, the pathway the access event had taken through the system. It had not come from Iranian frequencies. It had not come from militia networks. It had come from a contractor architecture, a U.S.-registered network prefix, fragmented and partially masked, but present. Someone on the American side of this operation had told the drone to shoot. She was sitting with this understanding, with its weight, when her scope, still set up beside her, lens aimed east, caught movement on the glass tower's 18th floor. The figure was back, and this time he was looking directly at her position. Not at the burning convoy, not at the boulevard below, at her. She did not move. Neither did he. For 7 seconds, across 600 meters of urban space, the two snipers regarded each other through scopes in a city that was burning around them. Then he raised one hand. Not a wave, not a signal. Just a hand, held up for 2 seconds, palm out. And then he was gone again. Elena did not report the hand gesture. She logged it internally, filed it in the same mental category as the drone wobble and the traffic slowdown. A pattern piece without sufficient context to present to command. Presenting it now would produce one of 2 outcomes. Dismissal, because a single ambiguous gesture from an unconfirmed position was not an actionable intelligence product, or escalation, because anything that complicated the official narrative of what had just happened to the convoy would attract the kind of attention that made things disappear, including people who had seen them. She broke down her position and moved. Lateral first, 3 floors down using the internal stairwell, then east across the building's skeleton to a new window. The glass tower was 200 meters closer from this angle. Floor 18 was still dark. Floor 19 showed a faint thermal differential when she pressed her spotting scope against the window frame and dialed in the heat-sensitive reticle overlay. The differential was consistent with a human body that had been in a position long enough to transfer warmth to the surrounding material, then vacated that position within the last 10 to 15 minutes. He had been there. He was gone. She marked the floor, the window bay, the probable angle of observation. Below on the boulevard, the convoy was reorganizing. Reyes had the security element in a perimeter around the damaged truck. The Prometheus hardware, or what remained of it, was being assessed by the 2-man technical team that had ridden in the cab. Elena could see them from her new position, bent over the transit case, their body language communicating the specific combination of urgency and controlled despair that meant the hardware was salvageable in theory and destroyed in practice. Marcus was on the command net, his voice filtering through her earpiece in fragments. Requesting updated route authorization. Requesting replacement ISR support. Both requests meeting the institutional friction that military requests always met when they contradicted the schedule someone in an air-conditioned building had already approved. Elena was scanning east. The thermal signature in the glass tower had been consistent with a single individual. No team. A team would show multiple differential points, overlapping heat signatures. What she had read was one person, one position, one set of warm spots, the kind of spread that indicated a shooter who had been prone or crouched for an extended period. Lone operator. Elevated position. Observation only during the ambush. She was working through the implications of that when the second ambush began. It came from a direction she had assessed as low probability, which meant she had assessed it correctly. Low, not zero, and the militia element responsible for this sector had studied their doctrine enough to know how American snipers built probability matrices and had chosen accordingly. The fire came from below grade. A subsurface infrastructure access point, storm drain, utility tunnel, she couldn't tell from her angle, had been opened in the median strip of the boulevard, and 2 fighters were firing through it from below the asphalt level, shooting upward at the MRAP undersides at angles that conventional defensive positioning could not easily address. The geometry was elegant and ugly. Hammer 2's crew was already dismounting. The security element was pivoting, weapons seeking the source of fire, finding muzzle flash at ground level and below ground, and not processing fast enough. Elena processed it in 2 seconds. She had no shot. The fighters were below grade. The asphalt itself was their cover, and from her angle she was looking at the top of their concealment rather than through it. She keyed the command net. Ghost 1 to Hammer 2, subsurface contact, median strip, 40 meters north of your position. Drive south, you'll pass the aperture. You'll have a floor angle on them from the vehicle. Hammer 2's driver made the decision without waiting for Reyes to relay the instruction. The MRAP lurched forward 20 meters, stopped, and the commander's weapon station rotated left and depressed to its mechanical limit. 2 seconds of fire. Silence from the subsurface position. Good kill, the station operator reported. Elena was already moving again. The city was doing what Marcus had warned her it would do. It was lying. Every rooftop she had assessed from her original position now looked different from her new angle. Sight lines she had logged as clean had acquired obstacles. A water tank she hadn't seen from the north, a parapet extension that only appeared at this approach angle, a stretch of communications antenna array that created a cage of metal and wire across what should have been open sky. She moved again. Third position in 40 minutes. Each repositioning consumed time and exposed her in the stairwells and in the open spaces between buildings. Professional counter-snipers knew that their targets moved, knew it and exploited it, setting up on likely repositioning routes rather than previous firing positions. She was thinking about this when she found the glass. It was on the 6th floor of the building adjacent to her current position. A different structure entirely, a residential block she was using for lateral movement. The glass was from a window, broken, but not broken by the ambush. The break pattern was old. What was new was the arrangement of the larger fragments on the floor beneath the window. 5 pieces of mirror-bright glass positioned at angles that, from most viewing positions, appeared random. They were not random. Placed to catch light and redirected, they created a set of small, reflected bright spots on the eastern wall, the wall she would naturally look toward when using this room as an observation point. Not bright enough to be deliberate decoys, bright enough to cause her to focus on the east wall for the half-second it would take her gaze to identify and dismiss them, which was the half-second she would not be focused on the room's other angles. Elena stopped moving. She looked at the glass arrangement for 10 seconds without entering the room. He had been here. Falcon of Quds, or whatever his real designation was, had passed through this building and left a trap, not a lethal trap, a sensory trap, designed to exploit the reflexes of a trained counter-sniper who had been taught to catalog reflective surfaces in enclosed spaces. He was studying her, not killing her, studying. She backed out of the room and found an alternate route, adding 4 minutes to her repositioning time. 4 minutes was meaningful. 4 minutes was the difference between getting to a firing position before the next contact and after it. She was thinking about the glass, about what kind of sniper left traps designed to test rather than kill, when Marcus's voice came through her earpiece with a tone she had only heard from him twice before. Ghost 1, be advised. Convoy is pinned. North Extraction Road is blocked. Militia has a vehicle barrier at the overpass. South route is the only option, and it goes through the sector where we took the secondary contact. A pause. And the Joint Ops Center has suspended ISR support pending review of the drone strike incident. Pending review, Elena said. Pending review, which meant the people responsible for authorizing the drone strike had now also authorized the removal of the Overwatch coverage that would have made it harder to conduct another one. What about the technical team, Elena said. Prometheus hardware? Destroyed. Total loss. Marcus's voice was flat. The official assessment will be militia action. The official assessment will be wrong. The official assessment will be whatever they decide it is. The flatness in his voice carried something she recognized now, not just cynicism, but the specific exhaustion of a man who had been right about things too many times in rooms where being right was inconvenient. Right now I need you focused on getting this convoy south. We have 11 personnel on this street, and the security situation is degrading. Copy. She found her new position, a northeast corner room on the 5th floor of a building with a clean sightline to the boulevard's southern approach. She assembled her rifle. I'm set. Elena. He only used her first name when the sentence that followed was not for the record. The glass tower, your unconfirmed contact. Is he still there? She swept the tower with her scope. Floor 18 was dark. Floor 19 showed a faint thermal differential in a new location. 3 window bays north of the previous position. He moved, she said. He's still watching. Watching the convoy or watching you? She studied the angle of the new position. The window bay was oriented south, with a partial sightline to the boulevard and a clear sightline to the building she had been using for lateral movement. Me, she said. Marcus said nothing for 3 seconds. Don't engage without confirmation, he said again. I know, she said again. She left her scope on floor 19 and watched the faint warmth of a body that was watching her back. The convoy's southern extraction route was 400 meters of compressed nightmare. Elena ran it in her scope before the vehicles moved, and what she saw was a textbook militia defensive position, the kind that got built in 4 to 6 hours by a competent commander who had been given accurate intelligence about where an enemy convoy would be forced to go. 2 vehicle barriers, disabled cars packed with rubble, blocking the primary lane at the 300-meter mark. Elevated firing positions in the buildings flanking the approach, and at the southern end, at the point where the boulevard opened into the broader avenue that led to the coordination hub, a heavy weapons emplacement that she could see only as a shadow in a ground floor storefront, but could characterize by the suppression footprint it would create. 11 personnel, 3 vehicles, 1 degraded. Approximately 260 meters of blocked road to clear before they could push through. Ghost 1 to command, I have eyes on South Route. 2 vehicle barriers at 300 meters, multiple elevated positions. Heavy weapon at South Terminus, ground floor, bearing 175 from your current position. Copy, Ghost 1. Reyes, tight. Can you service the elevated positions before we move? I can service what I can see. I count 6 elevated threats with firing angles to your route. There are positions I cannot see from my current angle. Best estimate on unseen threats? Elena studied the building profiles. Staggered roof lines. Multiple construction-era variants creating dozens of dead angles. A militia commander who had chosen this ground would have exploited every one of them. Assume equivalence, she said. 6 seen, assume 6 unseen. A pause. That's a lot of fire for 3 vehicles, Reyes said. Yes, Marcus cut in. We move anyway. Staying static is dying slowly. Moving is dying fast or getting through. A pause. I've been in worse geometry. Elena did not ask when, because it was not the relevant question. The relevant question was the heavy weapon at the south terminus, which she did not have a clear shot on from her current position. I need to move south, she said. I need a position closer to the south terminus to service the heavy weapon before you reach it. How far? 400 meters south of my current position. That puts me even with the terminus. She paused. It also puts me inside the militia's perimeter. Silence on the net. Timeline? Marcus said. 15 minutes to get there, set up, and confirm the target. Then you move. You're asking me to hold 11 people in a kill zone for 15 minutes. I'm asking you to hold them for 15 minutes so they don't drive into a kill zone that lasts significantly longer. She was already calculating her route, reading the building profiles, identifying the crossing points. The alternative is we push south without servicing that weapon, and Hammer 1 eats it at the terminus. Another silence. Move, Marcus said. 15 minutes. I'll keep the net clear. She was already going. The route south took her through 4 buildings and across 2 open courtyards. The first building was empty, a commercial ground floor stripped of everything removable. The upper floors a warren of abandoned rooms that smelled of old smoke. She moved through it fast, using the cleared room techniques she'd practiced until they were reflex, checking corners before committing weight, keeping her footfalls on the structure's load-bearing lines where the floor was least likely to creak. The first courtyard was 30 meters of open space between 2 buildings, overlooked by windows on 3 sides. She waited at the edge of the doorway for 90 seconds, watching the windows, reading the stillness for the specific quality of occupied stillness versus empty stillness. Then she crossed at a run, low and angled, not the straight line that a static observer would be expecting. She made the crossing, found the second building, and found something else. On the second building's 3rd floor, in a room facing east, she found a firing position that had been built and used within the last several hours. The signs were clear to anyone trained to read them. The window's lower pane had been removed cleanly, not broken, lifted out of its frame and placed against the wall. A professional's approach, minimizing the reflective signature of glass. The floor in front of the window had been swept of debris, creating a clean, prone surface. There was a small depression in the dust where a bipod had rested. She crouched beside the depression and measured it with her eyes. The bipod spacing was wider than the Barrett M107's standard configuration, wider than most Western sniper platforms. She photographed it with her tablet. Then she looked at the window's sightline. The angle looked south and slightly west. From here, the sniper who had used this position had a clean view of the boulevard for approximately 300 meters, covering the exact stretch of road the convoy would need to traverse to reach the vehicle barriers. He had been here. He had used this position before the convoy moved, or during the early phase of the ambush, or both, and he hadn't fired on the convoy. Elena spent 30 seconds in the room, reading it the way Marcus had taught her to read positions. Not just what was there, but what it meant that it was there. A sniper who built a perfect firing position on a convoy's likely route and then did not fire was either waiting for a different moment or operating under a different mandate. She thought about the glass trap on the 6th floor of the residential block, designed to test her, not to kill her. She thought about the hand, palm out, held for 2 seconds across 600 meters. She thought about the ISR drone strike and the contractor routing prefix in the Prometheus telemetry. She did not reach a conclusion, but she felt the shape of one forming, the way you felt the shape of terrain in darkness before you could see it. She spent another 30 seconds photographing the room systematically. The bipod depression, the clean floor space, the removed window pane leaning against the wall. Then she photographed the sightline itself, framing the view through the empty window frame the way the sniper who had used this position would have framed it. The angle of observation, the distance to the boulevard, the buildings on the far side that would have been in his background. She was almost done when she found the second thing. In the corner of the room, behind the door, not hidden, simply placed there as if set down during a moment of working and never retrieved, was a small cloth pouch. She opened it carefully, using 2 fingers and minimum contact. Inside, 3 rifle cartridges. Not standard Iranian military issue, not standard anything. Hand-loaded rounds, she could tell from the primer seating and the crimp profile, with a projectile she didn't immediately recognize. She photographed them and searched her memory. She had seen this loading spec once, in a NATO technical document on Quds Force sniper capabilities. An accuracy-optimized subsonic load developed for urban counter-sniper work, designed to reduce acoustic signature in dense building environments while maintaining terminal effectiveness at ranges under 400 meters. The document had described it as a specialty item, limited distribution, associated with experienced operators rather than standard IRGC sniper units. He was not a conscript. He was not a militia attachment. He was what the document had called a specialist, the Quds Force equivalent of what Marcus Hale was, a career practitioner of a very specific skill set deployed to a very specific purpose. She put the pouch back where she had found it. She did not take the cartridges. Taking them would tell him she had been here. Leaving them told him she had been here and had chosen to leave them. The distinction mattered. She was not certain why it mattered yet, but she understood that she was in a conversation with someone who read these details the way she read them, and the messages you sent by how you left a space were as important as the messages you sent by how you entered it. She left the room and kept moving south. She made the 4th building with 3 minutes to spare and climbed to the 5th floor, where a corner room gave her the sightline she needed. The heavy weapon at the south terminus resolved itself in her scope as a PKM machine gun, old Soviet pattern, crew of 2, set up in the gutted ground floor of what appeared to have been a pharmacy. The front of the building had lost its facade in some previous engagement, leaving the ground floor open to the boulevard like a stage. The crew had compensated for this exposure by building a sandbag wall across the opening, with a gap wide enough for the gun barrel and one operator's field of view. It was a good position, sturdy, protected from direct fire from the north. The operator behind the gun was experienced. She could tell from the way he was managing his field of view. Regular, but not mechanical sweeps. The kind of observation pattern that came from repetition and not from training manuals. She had a shot. Difficult but achievable. She was slightly above and south, and the sandbag wall's gap was oriented to cover northbound threats at street level. She was above street level. The geometric gap in his protection was exactly the angle she was exploiting. She keyed Marcus. Ghost 1, I'm set. PKM emplacement, crew of 2, bearing confirmed. I can service both on my signal. Wait for my first shot as your start move. Copy, we're ready. She steadied her breathing. And then Marcus said something that was not about the PKM. The glass trap, he said. You said he set up a glass trap on your repositioning route. Correct. Quds Force counter-sniper doctrine, specific to their urban operations curriculum. It's in the NATO intelligence annex from the 2019 assessment. A pause. I've seen it before, not in a briefing, in practice. Elena kept her scope on the PKM operator. Where? Mosul, 2017. There was a Quds Force advisor embedded with an ISIS counter-sniper element. We couldn't confirm a name, never got a shot. His voice was careful in the way it became when he was saying something that had been waiting to be said for a long time. His signature was environmental traps, glass, sound triggers, repositioned objects, not lethal traps, identification traps. He wanted to know who he was dealing with before he engaged. Elena processed this. He's been deployed for a long time, she said. Long time, Marcus agreed. Which means he's been in enough of these situations to know that killing the first person who finds his trap tells you less than watching what they do when they find it. I backed out and found an alternate route. I know. The line was quiet for a moment. He knows too. The PKM operator shifted his position slightly, adjusting for fatigue. Elena held her aim. Marcus, the contractor routing in the Prometheus telemetry, the reclassification event. I know. Whoever did that, they needed the convoy to be hit. They needed Prometheus destroyed. I know, Elena. If they needed it destroyed, she stopped, started again. If they needed it destroyed, it means the system was going to work. It was actually going to reduce drone targeting errors. Someone needed it not to work. Or, Marcus said quietly, someone needed the targeting errors to continue. Because the errors aren't errors, they're outcomes. The weight of that settled over the rooftop like the dust that never fully cleared in this city. Move on my shot, Elena said. She exhaled to the natural pause. She fired. The PKM operator was down before the convoy moved 30 meters. The second crew member broke for cover, which was instinct and not tactic. And instinct took him east rather than behind the sandbag wall, and Elena serviced him at 40 meters of lateral movement. The convoy pushed south. Elena tracked it, moving position after each engagement, cycling through the elevated threats she had identified. 2 on the east side of the approach, 1 on the west, all serviced before the vehicles reached their bearing. The unseen threats she had estimated materialized at approximately the rate she had predicted. 3 additional positions, 2 of which she neutralized from repositioned angles, and 1 of which engaged Hammer 2 with small arms fire before the vehicle's own weapon station suppressed it. The vehicle barriers required Hammer 1 to stop, and the security element to dismount and physically push through with the degraded MRAP's winch. 4 minutes of static exposure, the longest 4 minutes of the engagement. Elena covered them from a southeast position, scope sweeping the flanking buildings, while the winch cable tightened and the debris-packed car at the barrier groaned and then scraped, and then moved enough for the convoy to squeeze through. They were through. Then the jamming hit. Not the intermittent interference from before, full-spectrum suppression, a deliberate electronic warfare event that knocked out every radio frequency the convoy was using simultaneously. Elena's earpiece produced a single burst of white noise and then silence. Her tablet went dark. Her signals intelligence package flatlined. She tried the command net. Static. She tried Marcus's private channel. Static. She tried the emergency frequency. Static. She was alone. Not literally, the convoy was 200 meters south, and she could see it through her scope, still moving, Reyes apparently making the correct decision to keep pushing toward the coordination hub, rather than stopping in a now electromagnetically compromised position. But she had no communications, no ISR support, no Overwatch network. Just her scope, her rifle, and the city that was lying to her. She kept pace with the convoy from her elevated positions, running the buildings parallel to the boulevard, covering what she could cover from each angle, unable to warn them of threats she was seeing and unable to call for anything she needed. 3 more engagements in the next 8 minutes, all serviced, all solo. On the 4th engagement, a 2-man team in a rooftop position that she was late acquiring because the approach angle required her to cross a space without cover. She was still acquiring when the first shot came from an unexpected direction. Not at her, not at the convoy, at the 2-man team she had been late to acquire. A single shot from the east, from the glass tower. The shot was precise. One of the 2-man team went down. The other broke cover and Elena acquired him immediately, her own shot following within 1 second of the first. She held her position, kept her scope on the glass tower. Nothing moved. He had covered her. The sniper who had been watching her, studying her, setting traps to assess her. When she was late to an acquisition and the target was going to have a shot at the convoy, he had taken the shot. Not for her. She did not believe it was for her specifically, but the outcome was the same. She breathed. She watched the tower. She did not raise her hand, but she noted it. Noted it with the precision she applied to everything in the field, every piece of data that eventually became a pattern that eventually became understanding. Whatever this was, it was not a simple enemy. The convoy reached the southern staging area at 17:12 hours, 42 minutes after departing the overpass shelter. Elena reached it at 17:19, coming in through a parallel alley and presenting herself to the security cordon with her hands visible and her call sign transmitted on a backup radio she'd pulled from her kit after the jamming lifted at 17:08. Marcus was waiting for her at the command vehicle. He looked at her for a long moment before he spoke. "You're intact." "I'm intact." "Convoy is intact." "Yes." He handed her a water bottle and looked away at the staging area. Vehicles, personnel, the organized chaos of a security element that had just survived something it was still processing. "The Israeli technical team has confirmed the Prometheus hardware is a total loss," he said. "Joint Ops Center is calling it a successful defensive operation with acceptable equipment loss." "Acceptable equipment loss?" Elena said. Their words. She drank the water. The staging area smelled of diesel and heated asphalt and the particular scent of human adrenaline wearing off, which was its own thing, distinct from fear or exertion, the smell of the body releasing what it had been holding. "Marcus," she said, "I need to show you something." She pulled the tablet. The signal's intelligence package was degraded, but the fragments she'd pulled from the Prometheus monitoring connection before the jamming hit were still cached in local storage. She brought up the routing data, the contractor network prefix, the timestamp of the reclassification event. Marcus looked at it for a long time. "You pulled this from the monitoring connection," he said. "Yes." "You're not cleared for the monitoring connection." "No." He looked at the data again. His expression did not change, which was its own kind of expression. The stillness of a face that had received similar information in similar forms enough times that the surprise response had been replaced by a different response, slower and colder. "The network prefix," he said, "it's partial. The strike damaged the hardware. I got fragments. but the routing architecture is clear enough. It's not Iranian. It's not militia. I can see that. The contractor prefix is consistent with, I know which contractor, Marcus said quietly. Elena stopped, looked at him. You knew. He was quiet for a long time, long enough that the staging area moved around them, personnel completing post-action tasks, vehicles repositioning, the ordinary activity of military operations proceeding on its surface, while something else entirely sat between the two of them in the space beside the command vehicle. I suspected, he said. Knowing and suspecting are different things. Not when 6 people died in a valley in Iraq. His eyes moved to her. You know about that. I read the after-action report, the real one, not the classified summary. She held his gaze. The drone targeting failure in that valley, the routing data in the incident report, same contractor prefix. Marcus put his hands in his pockets. He looked at the sky above the staging area. Clear now, the late afternoon light turning the dust haze amber. I've been watching this contractor for 4 years, he said, building a file. I had enough to take to the Inspector General 18 months ago. And my file disappeared, classified above my access level. And I was given a very quiet conversation with a very polite colonel who explained that the contractor in question provided systems to 11 different U.S. military programs, and that disrupting those programs would have implications for ongoing operations in 3 active theaters. Elena absorbed this. So they buried it. They delayed it. There's a difference. In theory, he looked back down at the tablet in her hands. This data is better than what I had. The timestamp correlation to the drone strike is direct. It's not circumstantial. He paused. But it's pulled from a classified system you shouldn't have accessed, using protocols you were formally reprimanded for using. So it's inadmissible. In any official process, yes. They stood in the amber dust for a moment. There's someone else who knows, Elena said. Marcus looked at her. The sniper in the glass tower, she said. He shot the drone relay antenna in the early phase, before the main jamming hit. He was trying to break the Prometheus connection, cut the system off from the targeting grid. She paused. He knew what the system was doing. He knew before I did. An Iranian Quds Force asset knowing about a U.S. contractor's system manipulation isn't impossible, Elena said, if the manipulation was creating targeting events that killed Iranian-backed assets. If you're on the receiving end of drone strikes that your own intelligence tells you shouldn't be happening, you start looking for explanations. Marcus was very still. He came here to stop it, Elena said. Or he came here to exploit it, Marcus said. He covered my flank when I was late to a target. Tactics, maintaining an asset. He shot the antenna rather than shooting anyone in the convoy. Marcus said nothing. He's still out there, Elena said, and he knows things I don't. Night came to the megacity the way night came to all megacities under military pressure. Not as darkness, but as a different quality of light, the ambient glow of a million windows competing with the orange flare of burning vehicles, and the whitewash of military floods at the perimeter of the staging area. Elena was on the roof of the staging area building, alone by arrangement. She had told the duty NCO she was running Overwatch, and the duty NCO had been grateful to have someone running Overwatch so he didn't have to. And that was the end of the conversation. She was not running Overwatch. She was watching the glass tower. It was 300 meters north of the staging area. From here it was a different geometry than from the boulevard. She was looking at its southern face now, the face she had seen only at distance and angle during the day's engagement. The building's upper floors were dark, the way buildings in this sector were dark when their civilian occupants had the survival instinct to stay below the level where military activity was occurring. Except for one window, floor 18, southern face. A single light, small and deliberate, not a room light, not a resident's comfort. A point source, a signal. She watched it for 4 minutes. The light did not move, did not flash. It was simply present, in the window of a floor that had been his primary operating level, at a bearing she could reach if she wanted to. She thought about what Marcus had said. Tactics, maintaining an asset. She thought about what she had seen. A man who had watched her without firing for an entire operational period, who had set a trap designed to identify rather than kill, who had destroyed the antenna relay rather than any of the 11 people in the convoy, who had covered her flank at the moment she needed it most. She thought about the valley in Iraq whose name she no longer spoke. 6 men, 11 minutes. A contractor routing prefix in an incident report that had been classified above her access and above Marcus's access and apparently above the access of anyone who might have done something useful with it. She keyed the staging area command net. Ghost 1 to duty. I'm going off-site for approximately 90 minutes. Personal recon, building 300 meters north, not logging it formally. Ghost 1, that building is outside the security perimeter. I know. A pause. Understood, Ghost 1. She took her pistol, her tablet, and a knife. She left the Barrett on the roof. You didn't bring a sniper rifle to a conversation. The glass tower's ground floor had been a commercial space. Retail or office, she couldn't tell. It had been stripped to its concrete skeleton, the same stripping that had taken everything removable from every commercial building in this district. The stairwell was in the northeast corner, accessible through a service door that someone had recently oiled. The hinges moved without sound. She climbed. 18 floors. She was breathing hard by floor 12 and had regulated it to normal by floor 15. The physical management of exertion that became automatic after enough repetitions. She stopped 1 floor below 18, at 17, and listened. Above her, footsteps. 1 person, moving in a measured pattern, not pacing, not patrolling. The specific rhythm of a person who was waiting and had made their peace with waiting. She climbed the last flight and turned the corner. He was at the window with the light. The light source was a small chemical glow stick, green, placed in the window frame and angled outward. Minimalist, effective. The kind of signaling tool you carried when you expected to need to signal. He turned when she entered. He had heard her on the stairs. She had expected that. A sniper who didn't hear a person climbing toward him for 18 floors was a sniper who had stopped paying attention. And this man had not stopped paying attention. He was older than she had expected. Not old, mid-40s perhaps, with the kind of physical conditioning that added years to a face while removing them from a body. He wore civilian clothes, layered for the evening temperature. He carried a pistol at his hip in a holster that was not a military holster. His hands were at his sides, visible, which was the specific gesture of a man who had thought about what this moment would look like and had decided to begin it without weapons drawn. He said something in Farsi, then in English. You found the trap. I found the trap, Elena said. He nodded, as if this confirmed something. The sniper who finds the trap and changes their route is a sniper who understands that the city thinks. Most do not change their route. They enter the room and then they understand that they should have changed their route. He paused. You understand the city. I had a good teacher. Something in his expression shifted. Not softness, something more like recognition. The old man in the command vehicle, he said. I watched him in Mosul. He watched you too. I know. He looked at the green glow stick for a moment. I never had a good reason to fire on him. In Mosul, he was not the problem. He looked back at her. The systems were the problem. The systems were always the problem. Elena kept her hand near the pistol, not on it, near it. You shot the antenna relay, she said. It was the fastest way to break the targeting connection. I could not reach the hardware. He paused. I tried to reach the hardware first. 3 days ago, I had access to the staging route. I was going to destroy the system before it was ever transported. But the departure was moved forward. I did not have enough time. Who told you about Prometheus? He looked at her steadily. The same people who told you. The dead ones. Elena absorbed this. The valley, she said. Iraq, 2019. There were Iranian assets in that valley too. The contractor's system targeted them as well. We lost 7. He said it without inflection, which was not the same as without feeling. It was the inflection of a man who had processed the feeling into something else, something harder and more durable. The contractor's system does not distinguish between American soldiers and Iranian soldiers when it is told to create targeting events. It only distinguishes between the target package it has been given and everything else. Elena thought about the Prometheus data, the reclassification event, the convoy vehicle flagged as hostile. It was supposed to fix that, she said. Prometheus, AI distinction between civilian and military. If it had worked, he said, there would be no more manufactured targeting events, no more incidents that escalate what certain people need to remain escalated. He paused. There is a great deal of money in escalation. There is also a great deal of money in the contracts that clean up after it. The city moved around them. Below the window, 300 meters south, the staging area lights cast their flood illumination upward and created a soft, false dawn at street level. Somewhere to the east, a minaret was marking the hour. Elena had 2 things she could do. She could arrest him. She had no authority and no support and no communications that would hold a prisoner. But she could attempt it, and the attempt would determine a great deal about how the next several seconds unfolded. Or she could listen to the second option he was clearly waiting to offer her. You have something, she said, something beyond what I pulled from the monitoring connection. I have the source attribution, he said, complete, not fragmented, the contractor identity, the individual authorization codes for the targeting manipulation events. This convoy, the valley in Iraq, 4 other incidents in 2 years. He paused. I have had it for 6 months. It has not been useful to me because I cannot present it in any form where it would be believed. A Quds Force intelligence product on a U.S. contractor's criminal activity is not a document that American authorities review with open minds, but a U.S. Army sergeant's corroborating evidence, combined with a Quds Force intelligence product, sourced and verified, delivered through a channel that does not require either of us to explain how we came to be standing in this building. He reached into his jacket. Slowly, watching her hand, which was still near the pistol, he produced a small drive. Physically small, the kind of encrypted storage that fit in a pocket and contained the sort of data that had gotten people killed in 6 different countries over the past 2 years. There is a journalist, he said, American. She has been investigating this contractor for 14 months. She has sources she cannot verify. She needs something that corroborates the financial records she already has. He set the drive on the window ledge between them. I have been trying to get this to her for 3 months. Every approach I make is detected. I am a known Quds Force asset. I am watched. He paused. You are not a known Quds Force asset. Elena looked at the drive. She was thinking about the valley, 6 men, the incident report that had been classified above everyone's access. She was thinking about Marcus, 4 years of building a file that disappeared. She was thinking about the 11 people who had driven through 400 meters of compressed nightmare today because someone needed a system destroyed that might have prevented all of it. She looked at the drive. She was thinking about the valley, 6 men, the incident report that had been classified above everyone's access. She was thinking about Marcus, 4 years of building a file that disappeared. She was thinking about the 11 people who had driven through 400 meters of compressed nightmare today because someone needed a system destroyed that might have prevented all of it. She was thinking about DiMaggio. Corporal Anthony DiMaggio, 23 years old, first deployment, from a town in central Pennsylvania whose name she had seen on his unit patch, and immediately forgotten, and now wished she hadn't. He had asked her in the staging area whether her overwatch position gave her a clean view of the full route. She had said yes. He had said good, just that one word, with the complete guileless trust of someone who had been taught that systems worked and that the people responsible for maintaining them were doing so. She had said yes, and she had meant it, and she had still almost been late to a rooftop contact that would have hit the convoy at the point where DiMaggio's vehicle was passing. Falcon of Quds had taken that shot instead. DiMaggio was alive because an Iranian Quds Force sniper had covered a gap that Elena's positioning had created. She was thinking about what that meant, not tactically, but in the larger architecture of what this day had been. The contractor who had manipulated Prometheus had not been fighting for Iran or for America. He had been fighting for the continuation of a condition, an ongoing state of conflict precise enough to generate contracts and imprecise enough to avoid accountability. He needed the drone targeting events to continue. He needed incidents that could be attributed to militia action or system error. He needed the valley and the convoy and the 6 men and the 7 men and whoever came next. He needed people like DiMaggio to exist in a world where the systems designed to protect them had been quietly and profitably corrupted. She was also thinking about the second option, the one that didn't involve taking the drive. She had a shot. Right now, in this moment, she could take the pistol and end this conversation and produce a Quds Force asset killed in a hostile district and file it as a defensive engagement, and the drive would stay on the window ledge, and the contractor would continue operating, and the targeting events would continue producing the outcomes that certain people needed produced. That was option 2. She looked at it clearly, saw its logic, saw how it would be received, officially, as a clean outcome. Then she looked at the drive. She thought about Corporal DiMaggio, who had been in the cab of the package vehicle when the drone struck. 23 years old, first deployment. She had spoken to him for 4 minutes in the staging area before the convoy moved. He had asked her if the overwatch position would give her a clear view of the whole route, and she had said yes, and he had said good, with the specific sincerity of a young soldier who still fully believed that things being in place meant things would be all right. He was alive. The cab had been intact. Today, she looked at the drive on the window ledge, the drive that was not a weapon and not a piece of tactical equipment and not anything that appeared in any military doctrine she had been trained in. The drive that existed in the space between 2 wars and 2 sides and 2 men who had each been trying to stop the same thing from different angles for years without being able to reach each other across the distance that their institutional identities had placed between them. Marcus had tried for 4 years. His file had disappeared. Dariush had tried for 6 months. Every approach had been detected. She had been in this city for 9 hours. She was not naive about what it meant to carry this drive out of this building. It meant accepting that the chain of custody for its contents would include her unauthorized access to a classified monitoring system, her unauthorized presence in a Quds Force sniper's operating position, and her unauthorized meeting with a foreign intelligence asset in an unsecured building 300 meters outside a U.S. military perimeter. Every one of those things was grounds for a court-martial. Every one of them was also a data point in the same pattern. The people who had buried Marcus's file had done it through official channels. The people who had reclassified the Iraq incident report had done it through official channels. The contractor who had reached into Prometheus and reclassified a friendly vehicle as a hostile asset had done it through an official channel. The passive monitoring connection that was supposed to be receive only. Official channels were where this thing lived. Official channels were where it had survived for years. She picked up the drive. He looked at her for a moment. Then he looked out the window at the city. The journalist's contact protocol is on the drive, he said. Encrypted. The key is a date. The date of the valley. Elena put the drive in her jacket pocket. If this goes wrong, she said, and someone traces the drive to a source, it will not trace to me, he said. The metadata architecture is clean. It will trace to a commercial network in Cyprus that no longer exists. He paused. I have been doing this for some time. She moved toward the stairwell. At the doorway, she stopped. The shot you took, she said, when I was late to the acquisition, the two-man team on the rooftop. He was quiet. You were covering the convoy, she said, not me specifically. I was covering the convoy, he said, yes. Why? He considered the question for a moment. Not performing the consideration, actually considering it, the way someone considered a question they had asked themselves many times and had not fully resolved. Because the people in those vehicles did not make the decisions that put them on that street, he said, the same is true of the people I have lost. He paused. I have been fighting this war for 19 years. I am very tired of fighting people who also did not make the decisions. Elena stood in the doorway for a moment longer. Your call sign, she said, Falcon of Quds. That's what we're calling you. Something crossed his face that was almost a smile. Almost. My name, he said, is Dariush. She left him in the dark with the green glow stick casting its small light across the empty city. She was back on the staging area roof at 20:53 hours. The green glow stick in the glass tower's window was gone. Floor 18 was dark. The building had absorbed Dariush the way the city absorbed everything, without acknowledgement, without trace, simply taking him back into the geometry of itself until he was indistinguishable from the 10 million other presences that moved through its corridors, in alleys, in stairwells, and left their warmth on its concrete. She sat with her back against the roof parapet and thought about what she was carrying. The drive was in her jacket pocket, against her sternum, which was where she kept things she needed to feel the weight of. Not a comfortable weight, a necessary one. The kind that reminded you with every breath that you had made a decision, and the decision had consequences, and the consequences were not abstract. Marcus was below, in the command vehicle, writing the after-action report. She knew the shape that report would take because she knew the shape that all such reports took when the events they described were inconvenient. It would be accurate in its tactical details and silent on everything that mattered. Successful defensive operation, acceptable equipment loss, no friendly casualties. The Prometheus hardware would appear as a line item, destroyed due to enemy action, and the targeting data she had pulled from its monitoring connection would not appear at all. Because the monitoring connection would not appear at all, because the existence of a passive live connection in a classified system during transport was the kind of operational detail that made program managers uncomfortable. The official story was already writing itself. She could feel it happening below her, the way you felt weather changing, not seeing it yet but sensing the pressure shift. She pulled the drive from her pocket and turned it in her hands. The journalist's name was on the drive. The contact protocol, the encryption key was a date that she would not forget because she had spent 2 years trying to. She had time. The extraction flight was scheduled for 0600, 7 hours. The journalist was somewhere with a functioning internet connection and a source list that needed one more name and one more piece of evidence to become something that could not be classified above anyone's access level. She had time, and she had the drive, and she had the corroborating data on her tablet, and she had the photograph of the bipod depression and the subsonic rounds, and the routing prefix from the Prometheus monitoring connection. She also had a Quds Force asset who had placed a drive in her hand and walked back into a dark city. And she had no way of knowing, no certain way, no provable way, whether everything she had seen tonight was what it appeared to be, or whether it was the most sophisticated targeting operation she had ever encountered, designed to produce exactly this outcome. An American soldier carrying Iranian intelligence out of a hostile area, convinced she was carrying something else. She sat with that possibility for a long time. She tested it against everything she had seen. The glass trap that didn't kill her, the antenna shot that broke the Prometheus connection, the rooftop cover when she was late to the acquisition, the name offered without prompting at the end of a conversation he could have ended at any point. She tested it against the valley, against the routing prefix that matched the Iraq incident, against Marcus's 4-year file that had disappeared through official channels. She tested it against DiMaggio saying good with the complete trust of someone who had not yet learned what she had learned. She put the drive back in her pocket. She pulled her tablet and opened the journalist's contact protocol. At 1:15, Marcus climbed to the roof. She heard him on the stairs, his gait slower than it had been 5 years ago when she'd first served under him. The particular rhythm of a man who had given his knees to a career and was now negotiating the terms of that debt one staircase at a time. He appeared at the rooftop access door and stood for a moment reading the space, the reflex of a man who entered rooms operationally even when he didn't need to. He found her at the parapet and sat beside her. Neither of them said anything for approximately 1 minute. "After action is filed," he said. "I know." Joint Ops Center accepted it without pushback. The drone strike incident has been assigned to a technical review board. Results expected in 90 days. 90 days, Elena said. Long enough to lose the Prometheus monitoring logs in a systems update. Long enough for a lot of things, Marcus agreed. He looked at the city, at the ambient glow of it, the orange and white that never fully became darkness. At the glass tower, dark now, its upper floors indistinguishable from the building's lower floors. "You went off-site tonight," he said. "I saw it in the duty log. Personal recon." The glass tower. She didn't answer, which was its own answer. Marcus was quiet for a moment. He picked up a piece of loose aggregate from the roof surface and turned it in his fingers. "In Mosul," he said, "in 2017, the Quds Force advisor I was tracking, the one with the environmental traps, he left a position before I could reach it. Left it clean. One thing left behind." He paused. 3 specialty rounds in a cloth pouch, subsonic, hand-loaded. He looked at her. "I always assumed it was an accident, something dropped during a fast move." Elena said nothing. "I was wrong about that," Marcus said. "Wasn't I?" It wasn't quite a question. It was a man arriving slowly at an understanding he had been approaching for years. "He left them," Elena said. "He's been leaving things for people he thinks can read them, since Mosul, at least." Marcus put the aggregate down. "The valley," Elena said. "He lost 7 in the valley. Same contractor, same system, same routing prefix. He's been building the same file you've been building, from the other side. And tonight he gave it to me." She felt the drive against her sternum. Complete attribution, source documentation, 4 years of contractor targeting manipulation. Marcus did not move. He looked at the city. "Elena," he said, "if you're carrying what I think you're carrying, I'm carrying what you think I'm carrying. If that traces back to a meeting with a Quds Force asset—" "It won't trace back to a meeting," she said. "The metadata is clean. Cypress routing that no longer exists." She paused. "He's been doing this for some time." Marcus was quiet. She watched him processing it, not the tactical implications, those were secondary, but the moral weight of it. The specific weight that Marcus Hale had been carrying for 4 years. The weight of a file that had been buried in a valley that had never been properly accounted for. "I was going to ask you to hand it over," he said, "to me, so I could take it through proper channels." "I know. Proper channels buried my file." "I know that too." He picked up another piece of aggregate, set it down. "Who?" he said. "A journalist. She has the financial records. She needs source attribution and a corroborating technical product. She'll publish." "That's the idea." Publishing puts the contractor on notice. They have security resources. He paused. They have people. Yes. You've thought about that. I've thought about that. He looked at the glass tower for a long moment. Dark, quiet, the city moving around it in its constant ambient churn. The rounds in the pouch, he said. In Mosul. I photographed them. Sent the photo to NATO intelligence. It went into a file somewhere. He paused. I always wondered if he knew I'd photographed them. If that was part of it. It was part of it, Elena said. Marcus stood. His knees made the sound knees made after 30 years. He looked out at the city for a moment longer. The after-action report is filed, he said. It covers our positions and activities for the operational period. He paused, choosing his words with the precision of a man who understood that precision was not pedantry, it was survival. Any activities conducted outside the operational period are not covered by the after-action report and would not be my business to ask about. He walked back to the roof access door. At the door he stopped. The journalist, he said, without turning around, make sure she has institutional protection, a major outlet, not a freelancer working solo. She's not working solo. He nodded once. He went back down the stairs. Elena turned back to the city. The glass tower stood dark against the amber glow. Somewhere in its 18 floors, a man named Dariush was either still present or already gone. Into the city's transit networks, into the identities and routes and safe houses that a career Quds Force asset maintained the way other people maintain bank accounts. Necessary infrastructure. The apparatus of a long war. She thought about what he had said. 19 years. Very tired of fighting people who did not make the decisions. She understood that. She had not been fighting for 19 years. She had been fighting for 6, and she was already tired in ways that sleep did not address. She took the tablet and began the encryption sequence for the journalist contact. At 0340, the militia made their final push. She almost missed it. She was on her second hour of the contact protocol, encrypted transmission, fragmented across 3 relay nodes, the kind of communication architecture that took time and patience, and the specific type of focus that coexisted uneasily with the requirement to also maintain physical security awareness. She had set up in a corner of the roof that gave her sight lines on 2 approach vectors and had the Barrett assembled and positioned where she could reach it in under 4 seconds. 4 seconds was almost not enough. The first indicator was sound, not gunfire, not an explosion, but the specific absence of sound that preceded coordinated militia movement in this sector. The brief pause in the city's ambient noise that happened when a large group of people stopped their normal activity and began doing something else. She had learned to hear it in Fallujah. She heard it now. She was on the Barrett in 3 seconds. The militia element was coming from the north, through the same boulevard the convoy had used, which was tactically bold or tactically desperate, depending on whether they had reinforcements Elena couldn't see. She estimated the element at 30 to 40 fighters based on movement signature. The staging area's floodlighting caught the leading edge of the advance at the 400-meter mark, and what she saw was organized. Fire teams, flanking elements pushing into the side streets to prevent the staging area security from establishing a clean, defensive perimeter. She keyed the staging area command net. Ghost 1 to duty. Company strength militia advance from north, 400 meters in closing. Wake the security element. The staging area's alarm was a physical thing, a siren and floodlight intensification, and it came online within 20 seconds of her call. She heard boots on concrete below her, the rapid, organized sound of soldiers moving to defensive positions. She was already working. The militia's command element was in the second rank. She identified it by the communications equipment, the way orders were flowing laterally through the formation, the specific behavior of the fighters nearest the person making decisions. She took the command element at 380 meters, single shot, and watched the formation's coherence degrade in the way a formation degraded when its command node was suddenly absent. Not collapse, not rout, but the visible hesitation of people who had been told what to do and were now waiting for someone else to tell them what to do next. The hesitation lasted 11 seconds, long enough for the staging area's security element to reach their positions and begin directed fire. She was cycling targets, flanking elements in the side streets, the RPG teams she could identify by the way their carriers moved differently from rifle carriers, the communications equipment that represented the formation's ability to coordinate when the shot came from the east. Single, precise, from a bearing she had logged as clear. It took the militia element's secondary command node, a fighter she had identified as a squad leader based on behavior, but had not yet serviced because she was working priority order, higher threats first. The shot was at an angle she did not have from her position on the staging area roof. The angle required an elevated position 200 meters east and slightly north. The glass tower. He was still there. She had a decision to make in approximately 1 second, which was how long she had before the next priority target in her sequence acquired and fired on the security element below her. She made it in half a second. She left the glass tower bearing alone and serviced her next priority target. Whatever Dariush was doing in the glass tower, he was doing what he had done all day, covering the gaps, working the angles she couldn't reach, fighting the same engagement from the other side of a line that had been drawn by people who were not on this rooftop and not in this city and not doing any of the dying. She worked her targets. He worked his. The militia advance stalled at 200 meters. The flanking elements were neutralized, some by the security element's directed fire, some by Elena, some by the clean, precise shots coming from the east that arrived at the exact moments in angles where the staging area's defense had gaps. At 0418, the advance broke. The remaining militia fighters withdrew north, back into the boulevard and the alley network beyond it. The staging area was intact. Elena held her position for 10 minutes after the last contact. Then she swept the glass tower's upper floors with her scope. Floor 18 was dark. Floor 19 was dark. All floors were dark. She lowered the scope. She did not feel relief or resolution or the clean satisfaction of a successfully defended position. She felt the specific texture of an ending that was not an ending. The sense that what had happened tonight would continue happening in different cities with different names and the same contractor and the same system and the same outcomes until someone made the drive in her pocket into something that could not be buried. She began breaking down the Barrett. The extraction flight was a CH-47 that came in at 0547, 13 minutes early, which was unusual enough that Elena noted it and then noted herself noting it and recognized this as the specific cognitive state of a person who had been in a threat environment long enough that early helicopters registered as potential anomalies. She was the last one aboard. She stood at the ramp for a moment and looked back at the city. It was beginning to go gray at the edges, the first dilution of night that preceded dawn, the hour when the city's ambient glow faded just before the real light replaced it. The glass tower was visible at the northern edge of her sightline. Dark, ordinary, one building among thousands. She thought about a man named Dariush, who had been fighting a 19-year war and was very tired. She thought about the drive against her sternum. She thought about DiMaggio, who was already aboard the helicopter, asleep against the cargo netting with the complete physical trust of someone who had survived his first real engagement and was allowing his body to process that survival. She stepped up the ramp. The helicopter lifted. The shot she fired, she understood later, had been the easy part. The hard part was what happened in the 6 weeks after the extraction. The journalist, her name was Catherine Webb, and she had been building the financial records for 14 months with the particular dogged patience of a person who had decided that getting the story right mattered more than getting the story first. Received the encrypted transmission on the morning of the second day after Elena returned to her home installation. The transmission contained the drive's contents, the corroborating Prometheus data, the bipod depression photograph, and a written technical summary that Elena had spent 4 hours constructing with the precision she applied to everything in the field. Webb called the contact number 40 minutes after receiving the transmission. "I've been trying to verify the source attribution for 8 months, she said, on a call that Elena was having from a parking lot because she did not trust institutional communications for this conversation. "This closes it. How long before you can publish?" 6 weeks. We need legal review and editorial confirmation. We're going to take 3 simultaneous publications, domestic and 2 international. That way it can't be suppressed in one market. If they find out before, they won't find out before, Webb said, with the specific confidence of a person who had been doing this long enough to know exactly what she was promising and exactly what she wasn't. "I've been careful. So has the contractor," Elena said. A pause. "Yes," Webb said, "but the contractor has been careful in ways that produce a paper trail. Careful people always leave a trail. That's the paradox of this kind of thing." She paused again. "The source on the drive, the Quds Force attribution. I can't name him." "I know. He'll know he made this possible." Elena thought about a man in a dark building, holding a green glow stick, looking out at a city he had been fighting for 19 years. "He knows," she said. Marcus came to find her 3 weeks after the extraction. He found her on the range at 06:30, running drills that did not need running because they were already clean. The drills you ran when you needed the physical repetition to occupy the part of your brain that was managing something else. He watched her complete the sequence. She lowered the weapon and turned. "Webb's publication date got moved up," he said. 2 weeks from now instead of 4. Her legal team got a cease and desist from the Contractors' Council yesterday. They're publishing before any injunction can be filed. Elena absorbed this. "They know it's coming," she said. "They know something is coming. They don't know what, specifically, or they'd have been more targeted in the cease and desist." He paused. "The Inspector General's office received an anonymous referral this morning. Detailed allegations against the contractor. Financial records, routing data. The timing is not a coincidence." "No," Elena said. "It's not." Marcus looked at the target downrange, looked back at her. "The anonymous referral," he said, "came through a commercial network in Cyprus that no longer exists." Elena said nothing. "He's been doing this for some time," Marcus said quietly. "Yes." Marcus put his hands in his pockets. He looked at the range, at the gray morning light coming across the target frames, at the spent brass on the ground around Elena's shooting position. 4 years, he said. "I built that file for 4 years." "I know. And the valley." "I know." He was quiet for a moment. "The cease and desist names 3 potential sources," he said. "None of them are you. The Contractors' Council has apparently identified 2 former employees and a financial auditor as the likely origin of the leak." He paused. "Interesting misdirection, if someone arranged it." "Very interesting," Elena said. He almost smiled. Not quite. The expression that was not a smile but carried the same weight as one. "When Webb publishes," he said, "there will be an investigation. Congressional, probably, given the defense contracts involved. People will be asked about their knowledge of the contractor's systems." He paused. "I will be asked." "What will you say?" "I will say that I had concerns about contractor system integrity that I raised through proper channels and that were not acted upon." He paused. "I kept copies of every communication, every formal request, every response." He looked at her. "Properly documented concerns, raised properly, ignored properly. That's a different story than an unauthorized meeting with a foreign intelligence asset." "A very different story," Elena agreed. "Your name won't come up," he said. If I'm asked about personnel who had operational awareness of the Prometheus system, I will describe the Overwatch role accurately. Nothing beyond that. A pause. What you did off-site is not covered by the after-action report. You said that before. I'm saying it again so you know I meant it. He picked up a piece of range brass from the ground, looked at it, put it in his pocket, the reflex of a man who had policed ranges for 30 years. You made the right call, Elena. In that tower, in the parking lot, all of it. She thought about Dariush asking himself for 19 years whether the people on the other side of the line had made the decisions that put them there. I made a call, she said. Whether it was right depends on what happens next. Webb publishes in 2 weeks. And after that depends on what Webb's publication produces. Marcus nodded slowly. That's how it works, he said. You take the shot. Everything after the shot is the world deciding what to do with it. He paused. The shot you take is what's in your control. She looked downrange. I was trained by a man who told me that cities lie, she said, that every window is a rifle and every rooftop is a hide. Good advice. He also told me the city's geometry could convince you things were manageable when they weren't. She paused. I think the corollary is that just because things aren't manageable doesn't mean they're not worth attempting. Marcus considered this for a moment. The expression that was not a smile moved across his face again. That's a reasonable corollary, he said. He left her on the range. She raised the rifle. She ran the drill again, clean as it always was. The discipline of a thing practiced until it became reflex, until the skill and the person were indistinguishable. Webb published on a Thursday, 3 outlets simultaneously, domestic lead, international corroboration, the financial records, the routing data, the targeting event timeline correlating 4 years of drone incidents to contractor system access logs, the Valley, the Convoy, 4 other incidents unnamed but characterized with sufficient specificity that the people who had survived them would recognize themselves in the description. Elena was at her installation when it broke. She read it on her phone in the same parking lot where she had taken Webb's call, because some places accumulate their significance and you find yourself returning to them. The contractor's stock dropped 22% in the first hour. The Secretary of Defense issued a statement calling for a full investigation. The contractor's CEO released a statement categorically denying the allegations. A senator from the Armed Services Committee appeared on a cable news channel and used the word accountability 7 times in 4 minutes. Elena read all of it. She read the comments below the articles. Veterans, family members of veterans, people who recognized the shape of what was being described because they had lived in its shadow. She read the contractor's denial and the government's statement and the senator's television appearance, and she thought about the distance between the language of accountability and the thing itself. She thought about Dariush. Somewhere, Iran probably, or wherever the Quds Force sent its assets to debrief and reassign after a completed operation. Watching the same publication she was watching. Knowing, as she knew, that the publication was the beginning of a process and not the end of one. That the world had been given the shot, what it did with it was the world's business now. She thought about DiMaggio, who would read this eventually, who might already be reading it, somewhere on his base, on his phone, with the slowly dawning understanding that the systems he had trusted had been something other than what he had been told. She hoped he had people around him when he read it. She put her phone in her pocket. She drove back to her installation. 3 days after publication, a message appeared in the encrypted channel she had used to communicate with Webb. Not from Webb. The message was 12 words in English. 2 snipers, 1 city. The shot was yours to take. No name, no attribution. A Cypress routing prefix in the metadata, behind an architecture that was professionally clean. She read it twice, deleted it, sat with it for a moment. She typed a reply. 8 words. 19 years is enough. Find a different war. She did not know if he would read it. She did not know if he could. She did not know what 19 years of Quds Force service left a man with in terms of the freedom to choose his next assignment or his next decade. But she sent it. The transmission moved through its relay nodes and disappeared into the architecture of a world that was always communicating in channels that were not the official channels, always moving information through the gaps between the things that were documented and the things that mattered. She closed the tablet. 6 weeks after the extraction, Elena climbed to an overwatch position in a different city, different continent, different war technically, though the wars had a tendency to share their architecture. The same contractors, the same systems, the same gap between what the official channel said was happening and what was happening. A different boulevard below, a different rooftop under her boots. She assembled the Barrett by feel, in the dark, the way she had assembled it in every other city. She set up her scope and began working the terrain, building profiles, window assessments, rooftop hides. The geometry of a city that was trying to convince her it was manageable. It wasn't manageable. It never was. She scanned east as she always scanned east, the habit of a woman who had learned that the things she needed to understand was usually in the direction she was least expecting it. The skyline was quiet, no movement on the upper floors, no thermal differential in positions that should have been empty. She was alone on this overwatch. She did not decide whether that was better or worse than the alternative. She filed it as a data point and moved on. The convoy below was forming up. The mission was beginning. The city was doing what cities always did, which was lie to her about its geometry and its sight lines and the number of rifles behind its windows. She pressed her cheek against the rifle stock. She began to work.